Well, you thought last week was rough with blessings and woes. Welcome to the second half of the Sermon on the Plain. Love your enemies. Easy, right? There's nothing about this reading that is even remotely easy. It's just hard for us to think about loving our enemies. And I'm not talking about enemies like Russia or China or maybe even, I don't know, Texas. We're talking about, well, political sorry there. I'm talking about people in our lives, people who have hurt us, who have said harmful things, who have put obstacles in our way, who have denied us what we deserve for our good work, who refuse to acknowledge our worth, people who every day do their best to put us down. They're our enemies, aren't they? That's not a wrong word to use here, I don't think. And yet God says we're supposed to love them. So that's just hard to think about. How do I love somebody who does their very best to make me less than who I am? Who does their very best to make my life harder than it will be anyway, just because life is not easy all the time? And the answer is, and unfortunately it doesn't come from today's reading in Paul. Paul says at one point to heap good things on your enemies because thereby you will make them fools. Love your enemies. In other words, don't lash back. How you respond to somebody who is doing their best to be harmful and to degrade you is in your response to them. Your response is not to engage. Your response is to engage in a positive way. It's bizarre, but this morning on my drive in, I was listening to On Point, On Being with Krista Tippett, and the authors that she was interviewing had just written a book called Love Your Enemies. I thought, well, that's a sign. I don't think about signs very often, but that seemed to be pretty obvious. We are not to behave the way our enemies behave. Always keep in mind, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, I don't want to beat myself up. It's just not really helpful. It doesn't make my day any better. As a matter of fact, it makes it a lot worse. So I want to treat everybody, even those who are not treating me well, I want to treat them well. For hopefully therein they will discover their own foolishness and perhaps change their ways. Is that easy? Heck no, that's hard. The hardest things in the world to do is to smile in the face of evil and anger. But it is what we have to do. It is nonviolent. It is loving. It is of God. In the opening prayer this morning, we said, "You have taught us that without love, whatever we do is worth nothing." If we are doing anything, regardless of what it is, for a reason other than love, it is just ashes, chaff, dross, garbage, useless, not just to us, but to the world, for nothing can be built upon that. If we always do our best to respond from love, and we know we're not going to get it right all the time, just don't even think you're going to manage that, then we have a better chance of sending that love out into the world to a place where it would not have gotten otherwise. It's been interesting watching Canada respond to their trucker incidents in Ottawa and other places. Nobody's gone in with tear gas or rubber bullets or anything else. They did finally start to arrest them. It's been 3 weeks, but it's been 3 weeks. It wasn't the day it happened. It was 3 weeks later when finally people said, that really is enough. Now, you have to go home. And yes, if you won't leave, we're going to arrest you and we're going to move your trucks. But there was no going in with their fists raised as soon as it happened. That's an amazing thing for us on this side of the border to see happen. They were not immediately excoriated, castigated, persecuted for their beliefs, I don't agree with them, but that doesn't mean they don't have the right to have a different belief. They were cared for. They were allowed to store their fuel nearby. Who does that? Well, Canadians do. And Americans should too, and certainly those of us who proclaim ourselves Christian. We are to love, we are to give to people, even when they demand unreasonably. And it is unreasonable to have somebody hit you on the face and to turn the other cheek is demand that they treat you equally. When somebody demands your coat, Jesus says, just go ahead and give them your shirt too. Now, nowadays, that leaves us still clothed, but in Jesus' day, that would leave you stark naked. How embarrassing that would be for the person who's just said, I need your coat. Yeah, sure, here's my shirt too. No, really, guy, please put your shirt back on. And while you're at it, here's your coat. I'll see you later. That acting in love, not intentionally embarrassing somebody, but knowing it's going to happen. I mean, it just is. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe that's somebody who says, thanks, I'll take that too. These are acts of love. In Matthew's gospel, he says, if a soldier asks you to carry his pack a mile, which was their legal right, just go ahead and carry it too, which would get the soldier in trouble. It was not something you could say, no, I'll be happy to go too. And the soldier's going, no, really, dude, please put my pack down. Love has to be responded with love, even if it's just because the law says they have to. Eventually, they'll figure it out. So love your enemies, do good and lend, and expect nothing in return. That one is easier for us than most, although we do live in a society that says if you give me a birthday card, I have to give you a birthday card. If you give me a Christmas present, I have to give you a Christmas present. No, you don't. No, you don't. When someone offers you a gift in love, you say thank you. And when you have a chance, if you have a chance, you might offer them a gift of love as well, but it's not a quid pro quo. It's because you thought of them and how kind they have been to you, and you wanted to do something for them. The act of love generates an act of love. All of this comes down to that hard part about forgiveness. And even harder than loving your enemies might well be forgiving them, or forgiving anybody else, forgiving those you love even, who have suddenly done something that hurts you. You're going, I loved you. How could you do that? And you think about that, and you begin to build that little hard kernel of a grudge. And pretty soon, every time you see them, that's the first thing you think about. That's the first thing you see is how mean they were to you. And pretty soon, the relationship is dead. All because we took this little tiny seed of an injustice and made it huge instead of forgiving. One of the interesting things I think in the Joseph passage today, and I'm not really going to talk about that passage because Lord knows Joseph takes about, 15 chapters of Genesis. It's huge and long. We don't have that kind of time. It's not until Joseph forgives them and weeps with them in his arms that they can talk. It's not until the forgiveness has been given that the conversation can happen. Love has to happen first. And that's what forgiveness is. It's an act of love. Now, forgiving somebody doesn't mean that the slate is completely wiped clean and whatever they did is gone. If someone has done an injustice, they need to serve whatever the punishment is for that injustice, but your forgiveness is not linked to that. It is not, if you'll go to jail for 2 years because you bombed my car, then I'll forgive you. It's, I forgive you, now now justice needs to be served. It doesn't take it away. Human justice has to happen. It's who we are, it's how we operate as a society. But the forgiveness part, that's not human, that's godly. That is of God. It is us acting in the way Jesus tells us to act. loving our neighbors as ourselves, knowing full well we want forgiveness too. We do not want to go through our lives knowing that in other people's hearts there is still hardness because of us. It's painful. It's as painful as not forgiving somebody else. It's knowing they haven't forgiven you. When we come together to have that conversation, we in the church call that reconciliation, and that's different from just plain forgiveness. Reconciliation is the next step after some forgiveness has happened, after others have said, I forgive you. We have said, I am so sorry. Let's talk. How can we change the outcome of this happening? How can we make it not go away, but how can we live beyond it? How can we live now without letting the past completely color today? Forgiveness is probably harder than anything else we will ever do. And if we do it blithely, if we just say, oh, I forgive you, then we haven't paid enough attention. Because when we forgive, we have to change our hearts, not just those of the people we're forgiving. And they may not never even need to know that we've forgiven, because they may not know that we thought they needed to be forgiven. Forgiveness is as much for us, for our own lives, for our walk with Christ, as it is for those who forgive us. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us, says the Lord's Prayer, trespasses if you prefer. It's that as that we need to pay attention to. Forgive me my sins, Lord, because I have forgiven the sins that have been sinned against me. I have forgiven others, and I want to be forgiven too. We have to have both. And we have to love through the whole process. We have to hang on to that love that God has so richly poured upon us and walks daily with us in that love. And it is the love, the loving our enemies, the giving generously, expecting nothing in return, and being able to receive when someone feels they need to give without automatically assuming that means we need to do it back. Life is hard. Jesus doesn't necessarily make it easier, but Jesus gives us a way to see it so that when it is over, and even when it is happening, it is more alive. It is more healthy and holy. It is something that is rich for us, even in the smallest places. So love your enemies. Forgive those who need to be forgiven. Ask forgiveness of those who need to forgive you. And give generously, expecting nothing in return.